Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Family Couch. I am extremely excited to have with us today Dr. Deidra Sorrell, and she's going to be talking about how to talk about diversity with your child, with children, and she's also going to be talking a little bit about her book, which does just that. So, Dr. Sorrell, thank you so much for being on today and sharing with us your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful to be able to talk about what I'm passionate about, which is children and talking to them about diversity. So thank you for having me.
Yes. So before we dive into this awesome topic, can you give our audience a little bit of a background of who you are and what you do?
Okay. I am currently the owner of Synergy Wellness Therapeutic Services, and that is a counseling center. It's in Waldorf, Maryland, in Charles County. I provide individual counseling to children and adults. Also, I work with teenagers as well. And I've been in private practice for about a year now. Before, I was a school psychologist. So for about 18 years, I worked in the school system in Washington, D.C., and worked with supporting children with special needs. So I've been committed to mental health and working with kids and working with families for many, many years.
That's amazing. So lots of experience, lots of skills that you can totally share with us today as we talk about this topic.
Yes.
So I want to dive right in with this idea of what sparked you to write a children's book about talking about diversity?
Okay. Well, I have two children of my own, and I thought about them. I had them in mind when I wrote the book. I actually wrote the book in 2015, shortly after the Baltimore riots. And the Baltimore riots were in April of 2015. This was after a young man named Freddie Gray died, unfortunately, tragically died in police custody. And it was a time of just the city was just really frustrated, and the riots, it wasn't just about Freddie Gray. It was about him, but it was about other situations that happened in Baltimore, situations where people felt that there was injustice and there was brutality, and of course, the underpinning problem was racism. So I thought, as I was watching the riots on television, well, what would my children think watching this? What would they say? How would they process that? And then how would other children process that? And the last thing that I want to do is to have my children grow up believing ignorance, or believing all the police are terrible. All they do is brutalize. I don't want them to feel that all people of a certain race are this or that, because other people have been brought up to believe that certain people are negative because of their race or because of their skin tone. Yes. So I thought, what can I do to fight against this? I can't go out and riot. I can't do that. That's not for me, that wasn't helpful. That wasn't a helpful action for me and my family. But I thought of a way to educate children and to educate even adults, because some adults need to go back to basics and understand, hey, we are all humans. We are all the same. Someone may look different. Someone may speak a different language. Someone may have a different lifestyle. That doesn't mean that you treat them with disrespect. That doesn't mean that you think that they're lesser and that you're better. So that's really what the book is about. The book explains racism as a germ, because instead of saying, well, racism is something that is inherently part of a certain skin color, meaning I don't want children to think that I'm saying, well, all people who look like this are racist toward people who look like us. So I explained it as a germ, and explained it that a germ is something that is very harmful, something that can even be deadly, but it's something that through education and through awareness, um, that it can be reduced, and it can be, um, someone can heal from it. So it's something that, yes, through education, people don't have to have that germ of being biased towards someone else.
Yeah, yeah, so many amazing pieces there that I'm hearing. Even kind of the inception of your idea that it sparked came from such a tumultuous and violent kind of event, but you found a way to bring light to this event in a way that kind of helps people to understand it. Because I'm pretty sure, like yourself, there are so many parents who saw these things happen and unfortunately continue to see these things happen and don't always know how to bring it to their child, or don't always know how to answer it when their child says, well, mom, why does this happen? Well, dad, why does
Right.
this happen? And
Absolutely.
I feel like you did that in such a beautiful way with this metaphor in this book.
Thank you so much.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so tell us a little bit. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I want you to share more about that because I love it so much.
Sure. I was just going to say that watching on the news, there are things that have happened over the past few years. I mean, I'm not going to say that in the past few years there has been a lot of violence um, aimed toward Black men and Black women. It's just that we hear about it and we see it more because of social media. And when children, even when adults see this on the television or on social media, it's very traumatic. And it is very necessary to talk about it, but to talk about it in a very helpful way and in a very healing way so that people can process the trauma appropriately and not become part of the problem.
And that's the piece of it that felt very resonant for me, that it's not so much about saying, let's just talk about the problem. Let's just keep rehashing how it's a problem. But you said, let's find some solutions. Let's find some ways to help the next generation of people who are going to be our next leaders, who are going to be our next change makers, really begin to think about how this looks in their lives. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up because there's something that really annoys me about when other people have books or movies about the oppression of others, especially the oppression of Black people. They show this oppression and these horrible things that are happening, and there are no solutions, almost as if watching the oppression and suffering is entertainment. And I know that sounds so far-fetched, but I have to ask myself, well, if we have all of these slave movies and all these movies about oppression and about things, horrible things that have happened to us, but there's no solution. Why are we watching it over and over again? Because it is re-traumatizing. So in my book, I acknowledge that, yes, there is racism. This is a reality, but there's also a pledge in the back of the book where the children who read the book, along with their parents, along with their teacher, caregiver, therapist, will make a pledge to be open and not tolerant, because tolerance isn't enough. Tolerance means you're just tolerating somebody. No, to really be open to getting to know someone, learning about someone else, respecting someone else. Even if you're not friends with them, having respect and treating them well, even if they look differently. And that to me is the solution. And that to me is how children should be raised from the beginning. Children are not born racist. Research shows this. They are not born that way. Now, I know there is some little study that came out that said they are, but I don't believe that because based on my experiences working with children, I find that children are very open to people. Of course, they're used to people who look like them, and they're curious about people who look differently, but there is no negative association with someone who has darker skin or lighter skin or someone who speaks a different language or what have you. It is when the parents um, put the negative with someone who looks differently. Children are learning from their parents.
Yes.
Children hear what their parents say, and if they hear their parents say, well, these black people are thugs, then that's what they're going to believe. So when they see a black person, they're going to think, oh my gosh, this might be a thug, because to a child, their parent knows everything.
Mm-hmm.
Research supports that children who talk about different races and multiculturalism grow up to be more open as adults. There are people who say, we don't see color.
Mm-hmm.
And they think that that is the solution, and that's what will really reduce or end racism, not seeing color. People say, well, I see the person. I see, who they are inside and their personality. Well, that sounds nice, but that's not true. Everyone sees color. It's okay to see color, right? When we go
Yes.
out and we're walking through a garden and we're looking at flowers and we're sort of admiring the flowers, we see purple, well, not purple, we see red, we see yellow, we see different colored flowers, right? But we appreciate all of the colors.
Mm-hmm.
So to say, well, I don't see the color is really being dishonest.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing to do is to, yes, acknowledge, yes, I do see color,
Yeah.
but I don't associate certain colors with something negative.
Mm. Yes. And, to kind of harp on that idea, one of the things that I also share, and, as someone who writes about this, who understands this, when it says we don't see color, it also says that we're not seeing how this person lives in the world,
Mm-hmm.
I think. And we're not acknowledging that because of the color of their skin or because of what people think about the color of their skin, they're going to be treated differently. And I feel like that's a part of understanding diversity too, not just so much understanding the positive uniqueness of our differences, but to also understand that certain people and certain groups of people are viewed differently because
Mm-hmm.
of just the color of their skin. And so I think when we say we don't see color, we're ignoring and almost kind of dismissing those experiences
Mm-hmm.
as well.
I agree. 100%. So
Yeah.
I hope that people will get away from saying that,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not helpful.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to give you more work to do, but that might be a part 2 book, of how to
Yes.
have that conversation, how to
Yes.
change that rhetoric or maybe change that phrasing. So that way parents know what to say instead. That way we know
Yes.
what to say.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and then the book touches on that a little bit. So the
Yeah.
book it is about a little girl, and I'm just gonna
Yes, please,
show what it looks like.
please.
A little girl named Ruby and her brother are watching television, and they are witnessing the footage of a riot similar to the Baltimore riot, and they talk to their parents about what's going on, and the parent says, well, yes, someone was harmed badly, and we feel that it was because of racism. And the child, the little girl asks, well, what is racism? So the parent, the mother goes on to explain what it is. And the little girl says, well, I'm not like that way. I'm not that way to other kids. I like everyone. And the parent goes on to explain, well, let's talk about some ways, how you may have felt a little differently toward a kid who spoke another language. And I'm not saying that that's racism at all, because racism is very different from being fearful of someone because they speak another language, or kind of saying, well, I don't know if I want to be friends with them. Racism is completely different.
Right.
Racism is a system, and it is about having the power to oppress someone. But the parent goes on to talk to her child about diversity and how, you met this little boy who spoke Spanish in our neighborhood, and at first you were a little afraid, but now you're best friends.
Mm-hmm.
So then the little girl is able to understand, well, okay, this is what it means for me.
Yes.
Now, as an African American, as a Black girl, this is how I can be more inclusive of others.
Yes.
I have had a little criticism about my book.
Mm.
And it's not very hurtful. It's actually good. I mean, I like hearing all of the sides and all of the opinions about my book. Most people love it and most people think it's great. But some of the criticism was that, hey, look, forget all this kumbaya stuff. You know, racism, it is what it is. And, the book, talks about, it's a germ. Well, it's not even giving the correct definition of racism. So what I did in the book, there's actually a part at the end of the book, and it's a note to parents, and it says, this book is to help the child understand
Yes.
racism based on their developmental level. And the purpose of the book is to teach children to accept others and to be friendly and loving toward others.
Yeah.
Now, when they get older and when they reach different stages of development and their brains mature, they will be able to understand the scholarly definitions of racism. But this is not the time to give it to them, because they won't, you'll be talking and it's going to sound like womp a womp to them. You have to put it in language that they understand. And at the end of the day, I think that, many of us as African Americans may feel that we have really gone through a lot of oppression. But what we can't do is continue that by teaching children hate. We can't do that. And as a therapist, as a school psychologist, I don't teach hate. So the book that I wrote is, and even if it is a book that, most people think is unrealistic, I have to have that hope, I have to have that hope that this can happen if people put that effort and toward being inclusive, that it can happen one day.
And that's what I really loved and appreciated about your premise, where I could see that criticism, but at the same time, I think when we are doing foundational things for children, we're kind of laying the bricks, right? You don't start building a house at the windows and the roof. You start at the foundation, pouring that cement, saying this is what you're going to build upon as you learn, like you said, as you develop more and you get more critical definitions, you get more awareness and experience into the world. That child will always have that foundation of, okay, the first time I learned about diversity, I understood it. I now can kind of expand and grow that definition more as I meet more people, as I get into the world, as I go to school, as I have more experiences. So personally for me, I feel like that's a perfect book. Your book is a perfect book to lay that foundation that they will hopefully build upon as they have more experiences in their life.
Yes. Thank you.
Right. And again, I think too, kind of talking about this idea of oppression, one of the things that I've recently been talking to people about is that no one gets a medal for who's more oppressed. There's nobody in the world who gets to say, well, my family got more oppressed, or my group got more oppressed, or we're getting more oppressed than you. And I think we have to realize that when you are part of a marginalized community, no matter how much oppression may be on social media or be on the news, you still have room to say, I don't want to add to it. I don't want to now turn to another group of people because I'm oppressed and oppress them with my hatred or my anger, right? Just because my group now is being kind of, put in the news and my group now is being marginalized the most. And I think that we have to think that way, in terms of how do I not allow the hurt and the pain of my oppression to seep over into how I interact with everyone else. So I completely commend you for doing the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. We have to give our children the opportunity and the tools to do better.
Yes.
And hopefully as time goes on, that things will get better.
Yes. I completely agree with that 100%. And one thing that I wanted to ask you as we're kind of coming towards the end is like, how did you come up with the metaphor of racism as a germ? Because I found that to be so brilliant. Like I was like, that is a perfect metaphor for how insidious it is and how pervasive it can be sometimes.
Well, thank you. In counseling, one technique that we use with children is to name their anger, or to sort of disassociate the anger. So say you have a child who has a problem with anger, and they throw tantrums, they have problems in school. So what you'll do is you'll teach the child, okay, draw your anger, draw it as a thing, an animal, or whatever. Name it. Okay, so it may be named Mr. Grumps.
Yes.
Okay, so we address Mr. Grumps, not the child, but Mr. Grumps. So we're not saying the child is angry or the child is bad, but Mr. Grumps is a problem, and Mr. Grumps needs to. We need to do something about Mr. Grumps. We either need to change Mr. Grumps or uh, get rid of him,
Yeah.
put him on a plane somewhere,
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
works
Yeah.
with the child. So
Yeah.
that's what this is. So that we're not saying, well, all white people are racist, right? It's that germ. Because let's be honest, and there's one part of the book where it addresses colorism, and it doesn't, the mother doesn't say colorism is racism, but the mother says that is a belief that's similar or sort of like a part or an offset of it. Something, and that's, Black people believing that lighter skin colors are better than darker skin colors. Some of it can just be an attitude, and it can come down to who people will associate with, who people will marry, who people will give a job to. It can be that oppressive. So that is part of a germ, and that means that it's really all of our responsibility. And if we're going to do something about it, the book is for everyone, not just Black kids.
Yes.
But if we're going to do something about it, then we all need to make a decision and look at how we're treating other people who are different. So that's why I really wanted to look at it as a germ when we are explaining it to small children.
Right. And again, I think it's one of those concepts that kids learn early on when it comes to like washing their hands and taking care of their bodies. They understand why. And so I kind of feel like when you talk about racism in that way, it is about taking care of my body, taking care of my spirit, taking care of other people's bodies and their spirits as well. It's not just so much pointing out who has it or who doesn't have it, but this idea of how do I take care of myself? If I have this germ inside of me, if I can see it, how do I take care of myself? How do I say, okay, we need some antibacterial soap to get rid of this? Like we need to get rid of it. Right?
Exactly.
Right.
Because in the book, the little girl says, well, if it's a germ like the cold or the flu, I get rid of it. Well, mommy, you give me medicine to get rid of it. So is there medicine for this?
Yes.
And the mother says, well, the answer is to educate yourself. That is the answer. Right. Through education, through getting to know people, through talking to people, through having different experiences. When I was a child, I was in a wonderful organization called Children's International Summer Villages. And Children's International Summer Villages is a summer camp, but it's international. So if you can imagine going to a summer sleepaway camp for an entire month in another country, and all the kids are from other countries, that's what I did. So when I went to Sweden when I was 11 and stayed for a month and in a camp. And the camp was in a school, and there were delegations from all over the world, all over South America, Europe, Africa, and at the time, because I went in 1986, there was the Soviet Union, and at the time, this was during the Cold War. So I was frightened, so frightened to meet them. I thought they were going to look like monsters, and that's based on a lot of the propaganda that I was fed. But when I met them, they were the nicest people. They had no issues with us as Americans. They were thinking that we had 5 heads. So it was through that education that I would have never learned that if I hadn't been in that situation and had that experience to meet them. I went 2 years later and stayed with a family in Italy for a month and got a chance to just be totally immersed in that culture. As Americans, we have this stereotypical belief of Italian, and that comes from what we've seen in movies, which is so false. To stay with an Italian family in Italy, I got a chance to learn that they were just like me. So, and it was good for me, but it was good for them too, because they had thoughts and views about Black people that were completely false. They thought that we all lived in the slums and shot each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was just through that education, it changes you.
Yes. And I love that you shared those anecdotal pieces, because I feel like that also probably came into your experience as you're writing this book for children who hopefully one day will get to have those experiences where they'll get to, travel out of the country or meet different types of people. And they'll have such this beautiful foundation of how to look at diversity, how to even talk about it when they're in other countries, when people might look at them as Americans or as African Americans and have their own stereotypical views about them because of the way that we're portrayed in America when you go outside of America. So I love that you shared those anecdotal pieces, because I think those also probably lended their voice to your work and to the book that you wrote.
Yes. Yes.
So I'll say this, I know that we could definitely probably spend forever talking about this. And I have to be honest with you, there's definitely a couple questions I'm like, okay, I want to just keep it to our book. But I might have you on again to talk about, diversity in your work, outside of the book. But I do want to give you a chance to let our audience know how they can connect with you, how they can get your book, how they can reach out to you if they're interested in learning more about you. Let us know some of those.
Okay, absolutely. Well, my book is available on Amazon, and it's titled The Germ: How to Talk to Children About Racism and Diversity. And if you get on Amazon, just type in The Germ. Make sure you type in How to Talk to Children About Racism and Diversity, because if you just type The Germ in, then a lot of medical and science books are going to come up, and that's not what you want. So type the whole thing in, or just type my name, Deidra A. Sorrell, and it will come up. And the book is $9.99, so $10, nice paperback book. And again, there are discussion books at the end. Discussion questions at the end of the book. So if you're not quite sure how to talk, just really what to say after reading the book, there are questions, and there's a pledge at the end of the book as well for the child to sign, stating that they're going to be more inclusive. And again, I'm a therapist, and the name of my practice is Synergy Wellness Therapeutic Services, and my website is www.synergywellnesstherapy.com. I'm also on Facebook, Synergy Wellness Therapeutic Services, LLC, and I'm also on Instagram, Synergy Wellness Therapeutic Services. So please check me out. If you are in the Maryland area and you need therapy, therapeutic services, if your child needs therapy, please reach out to me. I take private insurance, Cross Shield, Cigna. I even take state Maryland Medicaid.
Nice.
And I take TRICARE as well for our veterans and our military population.
Nice. And so don't fret if you weren't able to jot all of that down. All of the links to connect with Dr. Sorrell, as well as to purchase her book, will be in the show notes. So you can definitely check all of that out and connect with her as you need to. And again, I totally feel like even if you're like, I don't know what to do, where to go, please at least check out the book. I think it's one of those things that almost every parent, regardless of race or color or creed, should just have in their back pocket if you have children. So you can kind of begin these discussions. And like we've said throughout this whole interview, is to really lay that foundation for them, so that way you can build upon it as they grow up.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Dr. Sorrell, for being on today, sharing your experience, your expertise, and talking a little bit more about your book.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. This has really been a pleasure.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.